Marta, lovely Marta, welcome back once again.
Back in the house.
Back in the house, and it's great. And you're always in a different house, which is remarkable. Every time we do this, you've moved.
Isn't it funny? This is the typical Cliff and Marta lifestyle. Although this is the second podcast at this location, I think. Yeah. I'm sitting in a different place.
There you go.
From next week, it's going to be another location. This time for a little bit longer.
All right. Okay. We'll hold you to that. I'll keep a note of that just to see.
Well, it's the one that we were originally meant to be in from the 1st of April and couldn't because of lockdown. So we're going. We're going. And that's really good to hear. So things are moving. And you know, we're starting to come out of lockdown this week in the UK. You know, on the Monday, we're recording this on the Wednesday. Shops, non-essential shops, whatever that means, were allowed to open for the first time. And I don't know about where you are, but here it's been insane. People have gone absolutely crazy. It's like a normal day. Traffic, people, shopping, unbelievable. Do you know what's fascinating? It's we went for a walk on Monday just to see what's happening and what's going on and whether most of the shops actually did or didn't reopen, and it was amazing to see just the dynamics of it. And we went into we're in central London now, so we went into towards Covent Garden that way, and I just needed to pick something up like a concealer. I've run out of concealer, you know, girly stuff, so I was like, I'm gonna wait until shops actually open. I'm gonna go into a shop, and I walk in and all the shelves are empty. It's a makeup store, but there's nothing on the shelves because there is no touch policy and they can't have any products out. So it was a bit eerie and creepy at least I knew what I needed. So I just said, I want that. Can you give me that? I paid and left. And it was nice to speak to another human being actually.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was fascinating. We're opposite the Apple store and the queues were insane.
I can imagine.
Like, insane. Because obviously we're 2 meter distance and stuff like that. It was just a big snake of humans.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. And what I noticed was that, you know, shops have their 2 meter policy. They're having queuing outside, but the queues are mingling because the shops are together. How is this going to work? It's just insane. Anyway, look, it's good that we're coming out and hopefully we can get back to some sense of normality. You know, I'm still desperate for the gyms to open and can't really understand why they haven't, but that's probably a topic for another podcast.
That's another story, right?
Yeah. But I was talking to someone I know quite well, and I was having this conversation about excellence and performance and striving for betterment and all the kind of stuff that we talk about as normal, you and I really. And they said something that was really interesting to me. And they said, well, I'm not really into that. I'm just happy to be where I'm at. I'm happy to be average, was the actual phrase they learned. And I kind of said, okay, well, that's fair enough. You know, you're entitled to see it any way you want. And I came away from that and it left me a little bit unsettled because I have this thought process, this knowing almost that we have within us this desire to evolve. I think it's an evolutionary thing. I think it's a universal thing that it's born of us. We are designed to improve. We're designed to grow. We're designed to evolve. And it got me thinking about this, why do people settle? And I wanted to bring that up here with you because I thought it would be a nice little subject to get into for a little while. What's your thoughts initially on that?
Juicy, like a good ribeye steak. Let's get in there, shall we?
So why do people settle for good enough?
What good enough means, really, right? What does that even mean? We can start there. I'm going to circle back around to what you said in a true Marta Wilde style.
Yeah, go for it.
Something that I saw recently, a client of ours went onto an amazing retreat, and the guy running the retreat put a very interesting post out while he was running the retreat and facilitating with loads of other amazing people delivering different experiences. And he talked about growth. You just mentioned growth, that innate desire and need almost in us, right? To grow and expand. But what he was saying is that people in self-development, coaches and mentors, sell growth to other people for that need of having to do something with your life and them having to sell a product. But really, truly, there is no need for growth because we perfect, whole and complete just as we are. And I sat and it made me think as well, because I talk about growth and evolution constantly. And
I got it that really, truly, because if you think about it from a more spiritual perspective, everything is perfect just as it is, even if it doesn't feel perfect in our eyes. So therefore, there is no need for anything, but there is a desire, right? So need versus desire. And there is no need for us to do anything. I truly believe, like, we don't need to grow. And when we tell ourselves, I must do, or I need to, we're telling ourselves that there is a force involved.
Mm-hmm.
And automatically when there's force involved, we constrict ourselves, right? So we do something out of a push energy rather than allow ourselves to be pulled and drawn into those towards those directions and destinations where there's something that's intriguing for us. And we don't need to grow, but we want to. We have that desire and that innate desire. And it's I think it's Judson Brewer that talks about that in his conversation with Sam Harris after he released his book, The Craving Mind. They did a podcast together, and I loved it when they were talking about that feeling of something missing in us, that there is that, and again, innate feeling of something missing in us. And for a lot of people, I believe we're misinterpreting it because we feel that there is a missing piece that we have to go after and have to chase. Or we then, like the guy you spoke to, we settle and we go, for whatever reason, which we'll get into in a second, like we just don't, because we feel it's unobtainable for whatever reason, whatever story drives that, right? But truly, to me and in my understanding, and that's something that's really drastically shifted my approach to life and how I feel about growing and expanding, is that we can't not. We're part of nature that continuously goes through cycles. We go through all our own cycles as human beings. The universe, as it's understood through physics, is continuously expanding, or our awareness of it is expanding. Either way, something's expanding, right? So we, being part of that greater collective, naturally grow and expand. But it's not a necessity. We don't have to. But again, it's just an interpretation of the words, right? What does have to and need to mean to one person versus the opportunity? I say I get to do this because I'm giving myself an opportunity to do stuff. If I feel like I need to or have to, like I said, I feel like I'm forcing, right? But again, it's just an interpretation. And therefore, the same thing with how that guy was talking about growth and how I would speak about growth with you, for example, is the same thing, just slightly different words. We are perfect and complete, but who really truly understands it on a much more metaphysical level, right? Where we've got constant marketing, constant, like it's almost compulsive urge to do things, to buy things, to be better, to do better, all of that stuff, right? That we signed up for living in the world that we're living. But really, truly, I feel growth is just something that's our nature. And it's that exploration, not because there's something missing. We can misinterpret that feeling for something missing, but really, truly, it has to be there because otherwise we wouldn't do anything. We wouldn't be able to explore and experience and sample everything this life and this world has to offer. And why, to answer, circle back around to your question, why do people settle? It's fear. It is fear of not being able to fulfill your own expectation of yourself. That's not even your own expectation. It's been passed on by somebody else, right?
That's what I've got written down here. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah.
It's a fear of not being able to fulfill an expectation. So therefore, why would I bother? And something interesting that I was speaking to one of our group programs about on our call yesterday, and that's actually, in fact, some of the work that I've been doing with them, is using the ability that we have to visualize the future and to imagine a version of us that we might desire to become. But how far do you take it and where do you go with this? And Cliff and I had a conversation a couple of months about it, that it was a physical study done on people. They were put into an MRI, visualizing themselves and their future version of themselves.
Right.
And they were looking at the brain's response to it. And the brain responded to that vision and picture of someone out there in the future as a stranger.
Wow. Okay.
Not
very interesting.
You, a couple of months or a couple of years ahead, but
a complete stranger.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens when we see, for majority of people, when we see someone that has the things that we want to have, that lives the life that we want to live, that is being the person that we want to be, but we don't have it, we automatically want to protect ourselves because we have to find a validation as to why we're not there ourselves yet.
Yeah.
So it becomes so clear why visualization, unless understood and deconstructed in a very individual way to each person, is not going to work, right?
No.
Or it could be a very painful experience because you're visualizing a stranger that you can't connect to. So therefore, using the self-protecting mechanism of our body, you're going to automatically block that person, and you're not going to want to go anywhere near them. So how do we break this down into
there's that
smaller
subconscious
steps?
kind of narrative as well, that if you're seeing a stranger, if you're seeing something you can't resonate with, you don't believe it. And belief is such a powerful tool in bringing to you something different, change, growth, evolution, that to not believe what could potentially happen is immediately going to stop any form of manifesting, any form of attraction, any form of results. Call it what you want. It's so fascinating what you say, because I wrote a few things down before we started, and you've pretty much covered it all. It's incredible. Brilliant. And some of the things I've got written down: exploration, the stories we're told. And I'm a big believer in this, that a lot of the reasons why people settle, a lot of the reasons why people don't go after what they want, it's just because they're told that they can't. From the youngest age, they're told, but usually well-meaning people, usually people that want to protect them, that actually they can't go and do that. They've not got the qualifications. They've not got the resources. They've not got the skill set. You know, they come from the wrong neighborhood. They don't know the right people. So they haven't got enough money, whatever it is. And those become entwined with our own beliefs. And it kind of sets up this position where, well, as long as I can do what everyone else is doing, I'm not going to stand out in any way. And then there's no problem.
You feel safe because we all have that innate desire to fit in, to be accepted. Yeah. And it's the internal stories that we carry from our childhood very early on, very often. And there's also the environment that we're in, that we surround ourselves with, the people, the mentality, the religion, the customs of a certain country, the culture, all of that stuff. And you know, we can start dissecting and deconstructing it deeper, the way someone in their 30s, 40s, or 50s is in a certain environment, unless they're aware and understand how to navigate where they go in life and where they desire to be, they're going to be almost a replica of what they learned at home. It might not look like that on the surface, but when you understand their behaviors and their patterns, the job they're doing, it's going to be what was accepted in the original tribe, if you like, that they came from. Because it's a very primal instinct in us to not be kicked out of the tribe. Because when it was very applicable, when we lived in tribes, we couldn't get kicked out because that meant the end of us. We wouldn't survive on our own. But right now, the fact that you choose to earn more money than your parents, for example, or you choose different line of education or live in a different country or whatever, different community, does not mean that you're going to get kicked out. But that primal response within us is still there, telling us, alarm lights going off, telling us you're going to get kicked out, you're going to get disarmed, you won't survive. It literally means you're going to fucking die. You won't, obviously you won't, but unless we able to nurture that part of ourselves, unless we're able to communicate with those stories and shift how we look at certain things, we might go somewhere. There might be people that make shitloads of money, but they will lose it, spend it all, or lose it, or go bankrupt because they physically haven't got the emotional framework and the neural framework to support holding that capacity, that container for being able to create that wealth. It could be financial wealth. It could be emotionally in relationships. We want to have a very different relationship to what we learned from our parents, for example, at home. But we haven't built that emotional and neural framework and capacity to be able to hold that. We might get there because we're going to rebel, right? And we might want to go and do everything differently. But what's going to happen after? And no one teaches us that shit.
No. And you know, you've made, it's funny what comes into your mind, right?
when you was talking about that and when you was laying that out so succinctly, I had a vision of a teaching I once got from Jim Rohn years ago. And he said, and I've heard him say it on many videos, I've read it in books of his, if you are given $1 million, you better become a millionaire very quickly. And I think that just about sums up beautifully what you said, that it starts from the inside out. And we've spoken about this before, that most people live outside in. And you've seen that, you know, we started at the top of the show by talking about how people have gone a little bit crazy with shopping and whatnot and getting out and feeling a little bit free. And that's an outside in mechanism, because we don't need anything. We really don't. We're all safe. We live in a first world country. All right, we're under lockdown and there are certain conditions that things we can't do, but we can get stuff. We can order stuff in.
Yeah.
You know, we're working. Majority of people are working. There's money flying around the economy, but although they tell us that we're going to crash at some point. Again, another story, right? But
what we told and pay attention to, we believe and then become, right?
And then it becomes, self-fulfilling cycle, right? Prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy. But what Jim was saying to me all those years ago was like, you have to prepare the internal mechanism, the internal story, the internal dialogue first, because it doesn't matter what situation you're put in. If you don't support that internally, you're going to bat against that, and it's going to trigger you, and it's going to cause suffering, and it's going to cause pain, and you're going to run away from it.
Well, if you think about it, what's the physical percentage? Cliff is just there. He'll tell me. What's the percentage of lottery winners that lose it all within however long? Can't remember the numbers, but the number is really, really high of people winning lottery within the first 10 years, I think.
Yeah, I think it's actually 5 years. I think I've seen that. I think I've seen that. I think it was something like about 80%. Yeah, it's a huge number.
Yeah, it is a very, very high number. Yeah. And people very often, you know, and I still have visions of my mom going, oh, if I just win the lottery. And I'm like, oh, dude, seriously. But again, people don't know any different, right? You might win the lottery and you might do something worthwhile with it. But unless you have that internal structure, and there is an internal structure, but there's also the external support as well to be able to allow you to understand. Because if you have shitloads of money, that doesn't mean that you have to understand taxes, that you have to understand accounting, right? If you have that financial wealth present in your life, it's not down to you to have to know everything about it. If you try, that's probably even more likely when you're going to crash and burn.
Yeah.
So it's building that internal and having the external support and the structure around you to support that. It's also a reflection of what's going on internally, because you get to have that awareness that this is what you desire and require. A financial advisor, a tax advisor, whatever it might be, to allow you to be able to go and hold that space for that wealth. And again, it could be for other things just as much. We're so conditioned to money being that kind of trigger for every single one of us, right? But it could be just as much in a relationship. If you come from an abusive childhood and you want a loving relationship in your adult life, you get to have a support coming internally from the internal world and coming in from the external world to be able to hold space, to be even able to receive and accept that. And if you think with the journey that Cliff and I have been on for the last 11 years together, there's a number of times where we realize we think we're doing everything differently, but when you look under the surface, lift the lid up, you're like, we're just fucking repeating our parents' patterns. But that, we don't treat it as a failure. We go, oh shit, another awareness of something else that we would like to adjust because it doesn't serve us doing it the way they did it. No. But there's other things that we do the way our parents did that we're really grateful and appreciative of. So it's understanding that if we hate them for everything, but you can't really, because there's going to be different parts that you took on that are super supportive of who you want to be, and certain parts that you don't want to have and be anymore. But it's then going back to what we talked about, being kicked out of the tribe, is understanding that we get to understand that us wanting to do things differently, we initially kick off that response of freak out and fearing that we're going to be kicked out. So we get to work through that. So if it's a financial advisor or a tax advisor when it comes to money, or whether it's a coach or a mentor or therapist or whoever it is, when it comes to love and relationship, your physical health, your mental health, whatever aspects of our life we're talking about, there is that internal support and the external support. That's the trademark of Cliff and Marta Wilde. That was Millie shaking. Did you hear that? A little bell.
I heard
off.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I heard that. It's great.
If that's not happening on our live streams or
It's not a proper
trainings and
live stream,
recordings,
right?
people are like, "Where's Millie?"
Yeah, I know, it's crazy.
Because she has a little bell on her collar. Because when we lived in Cyprus and we had a great big garden, we just couldn't find her, so we wanted to make sure we know where she is. And now it's like an identity for her. We take it off
Perfect.
at night, and as soon as we pick up her collar in the morning, she's right there because she heard the little bell.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Pavlov's dogs, right?
Literally what I was
Yeah.
gonna say. She's not drooling though.
She's not drooling. She's not expecting steak or something like that, right? No, that's incredible. And you know, I did a training video earlier, and I was talking about that. It was based around cause and effect, effectively, and this concept that my life's not working. That clients or people tend to say to us when we work with them or when we talk with them. And I always tell them that life is working, because it's working exactly in relation to the systems or processes that you've put in place yourself or had put in place by others. And if you want to change, like if you have a business and the systems aren't working, you change the systems, right? You don't try and change the results without going back and saying, well, this marketing system, this accounting system, this software system, whatever it is, isn't working. We're going to change it. You have to go into that and work with the systems. And it's the same with our lives, that if we want to set up ourselves for success, if we want to be unstoppable, let's say, we want to be relentless, we want to be astonishing. I love that word. You know, it's my new word, astonishing. Then we're going to need systems in place. Mental systems, emotional systems, physical systems, spiritual systems, relational systems, monetary systems, the whole 9 yards. We're going to need these in place from day one to set us up for this success, this astonishing life we want to lead.
Absolutely. And people are often afraid of doing the work because I think we spoke about it in one of our first podcasts together. It's coming back to the stages of life where as children we just run around freely and life happens as us because we don't know any difference, right? And then as soon as we go to school, as soon as we develop any comprehension of what other people are saying, way before that anyway, but that's a different story. But we take everything in, we create those stories that life starts happening to us, right? And when you realize something isn't working, you think it's an external influence. Well, it is in a way, because it was kind of like coming in from whatever you were observing as a child, but it's your responsibility to do something about that. And very often the block is that we don't know what to do, how to do it. We are afraid of doing the work, or we feel like we shouldn't be doing the work because it was given to us. I went through a whole stage in my early 20s where I just wouldn't even speak to my mom and dad for about a year because I was just so resentful and so bitter about all the shit they handed me over, and I didn't fucking ask for it. But when you go down the spiritual route, we kind of sign up for the shit way before we even turn up. It's part of the path, right? And us learning whatever we need to learn. But not a lot of people will accept that, and not a lot of people will be ready to get to that point where they go, I get it, I signed up for it, I don't quite understand it because I can't really with the senses and the comprehension of a human brain and a human being, but I get there's something greater than me. And we go from the victim stage of life when life happens to us to life happens for us, and we see everything eventually as a gift and something to learn from and improve and get greater. And then life happens through us where we pass it on to other people. Our own personal experiences become a lesson and an inspiration for others to do something with their own lives. And like you said, life is always working. It's the same thing with trust. When people say, oh, I don't trust myself, or I don't love myself, or my life isn't working, you do trust yourself 100% in something. You might trust yourself in the fact that you don't trust yourself. That's still 100% trust. If you think you don't love yourself, you absolutely do. It's what love means to you, because you could have learned love being abused by being abused as a child. Therefore, now your interpretation subconsciously of love and self-care is abuse. And the same thing, my life is not working. Well, it is working, and following the exact patterns, procedures, systems that you've put in place and have been put in place for you. It's now, if you become aware of it, now it's your chance to do something about it. And that's when we always talk about the ARA, right? That Cliff and I teach and live our lives by, and we call it a method, but it's really a way of life. It's that middle step, the R. You're aware of it first, but then you have to take responsibility. No one else can do that for you.
No.
People like you or myself or Cliff, we can help and assist. And that's the external support network, right? But the decision to take a different action is always coming from that responsibility personally.
100%. Yeah. And that's sometimes the biggest lesson people have to learn. You know, some people aren't really ready to hear the more spiritual or metaphysical aspects of it all. But fundamentally, we all know that if something's going wrong, then there needs to be some element of change. And that change has to come from within. So there has to be a degree of being comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling, that struggle, that suffering, and that realization that actually it's fine and it's part of the process and you can get through it and you are safe, and that's the whole idea of it all. Yeah,
exactly. And it's understanding that, always talk about comfort zone in a slightly different way. And it was a good friend of ours that shared that perspective with me a few years ago now, and I loved it. And again, it was just like understanding that I always trust myself. I just might not trust in the things I prefer. It's the same thing with comfort zone, where if you look at how physiologically we respond to getting outside of our comfort zone when there's danger, and that fight or flight or freeze mechanism, self-preserving mechanism kicks in, we're not going to do anything productive or constructive outside of our comfort zone. But when you can ask yourself, what else can I be comfortable with today? And it's rather than, like we were talking about, projecting your vision of yourself into the future, 10 steps or 10 points, is going, okay, if I'm at number 5 today, what is my 5.1 today? What else can I be comfortable with? And that little bubble of comfort zone expands, and we expand within it. So before we know it, you know, that picture, this is you and this is your comfort zone, and you're in the little circle. Sorry, this is what you want and this is your comfort zone. And the memes circulating around the internet that you have to step out to get there, you don't. You increase that bubble, and eventually you swallow all the things that you wanted to become or have or do in, and you're being that person, doing the things, having those things without the stress, and completely frying your nervous system, freaking the fuck out, sabotaging yourself, going through hell and thinking that you have to go through hell to get there. You can do it with a lot more grace, but not a lot of people are prepared to understand that it can be this way. It might feel like a longer way, or it's going to be around the houses, but really, truly, when you invite grace into your expansion, you allow yourself to breathe, and you allow yourself to honor yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, on all different levels, and still get to the desired effect, but with a lot less physical and emotional stress on the body. That's your vessel to get you there in the first place. So if you fuck this up, how are you going to get there, right?
It's interesting. You remind again of something's just popped into my mind while you've been talking there, and it's Alan Watts actually, and he was talking about enlightenment, awakening, spirituality, and he was saying, what are you rushing for? It's not a race, right? It's like music. The point of music isn't to get to the end note as quickly as possible, right? And the point of growth isn't to get to the end point as quickly as possible. You know, it's about the unfolding of things and the experience of the unfolding of things. And I think the personal development industry, the spiritual industry, whatever you want to call it, you know, kind of sells a bill of lies there a little bit, because they make out that this awakening is a huge cacophony of, you know, angels blowing trumpets and this seeing of everything unfolding, and, you know, like Neo in the Matrix at the end where he sees everything, right? And it's not normally, in my experience, like that. It's normally little bits, little understanding, little nuances along the way. Okay, I never noticed that before. That's interesting. How wonderful is that? And that growth is not linear. It can be small, and then it can be big, and then it can compact a little bit, but it's growth nevertheless, and all of it is welcome.
Absolutely. I knew you were going to mention that concept from Alan Watts, and there is an amazing little video that's on YouTube, Life is Not a Journey. And I still call it a journey sometimes, but then I realize I'm like, actually it's not. I really truly resonate with this concept, because it's a dance, like you were saying, right?
Dance, that's what he says. It's like a dance, right? Yeah, that's exactly what he says.
The point of it is not to get to the end of the track, it's to dance and enjoy the freaking thing in the middle, right? And if you think Dan Millman in The Peaceful Warrior talks about, it's not the destination. It's the journey that brings us happiness, not the destination, right? Which is the same thing, really, just said in slightly different words. And I love that video. So if the guys listening haven't seen it, go and search on YouTube for Alan Watts. And
do you know what? I'll put the link in the notes.
Yes.
If I'll write an Alan Watts video.
And it's incredible. It's one of those where someone draws pictures on a whiteboard.
Yes.
And his words are in the background.
Yes.
It's incredible.
I'll try and find that.
It takes you through the ridiculousness of the concept that's being sold to us of what life is. That you're constantly getting to somewhere, that you have to go to school, that you have to graduate, that you have to go to uni, that you have to have a family, children, work, and be in a job. And for what? And by the time where they tell you, oh, now you can relax and enjoy it, you're very often screwed and sick and
burnt out and exhausted.
Exactly.
And,
like, what is the point?
Your life force is spent, right? Your life force is spent living someone else's life.
It's very visual, and it really makes you think. So I think it's just one of the best things people can watch to really, and especially now coming out of lockdown, having had that space and time that we talked about on our last podcast, where so much stuff has come up for people, whether they knew it or wanted it or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would have come up because of the space that was created, even regardless of whether they were still working or not. There were still things that we couldn't do. There were still limitations. There was still space being created for whatever needs to come up, because we have to face it. There's no hiding from that anymore. No. If we run away, we'll collapse.
What will be interesting is what happens now as we come out of lockdown. So people have had this space. They've had a chance to get to know themselves, shall we say. And now shops are opening. People are going back to offices. It won't be long, I don't suppose, before restaurants, bars, pubs, gyms start opening. So life starts to get back to some sense of normality. We've got the Premier League football kicking off today, albeit without crowds. So sporting events will start to get going, then concerts will start to get going, and people will find themselves back in life's hamster wheel. And I just wonder if bit by bit, slowly by slowly, or maybe very quickly, I don't know, people will be back in that life once again, back living that falsehood. It's an interesting thought.
It will be interesting to see, I guess. Every single one of us have got their own perception, I think. And I focus on myself and how I am approaching it and observing myself. And therefore, at the same time, looking at the people around me, my clients, family, friends. And I tend to not really spend a lot of time and energy on the greater collective, because there's certain things I can affect and certain things I can't. So if I spend my energy thinking or worrying or considering or whatever, or wishing for certain things, I'm missing the point. Because I've always said that if everyone focused on themselves, their own life, and looked after themselves, people like yourself, like Cliff and me, would be out of our job, because everyone would be looked after, right? Yeah. Because they would be doing it for themselves. So my focus is on me, and my focus is on our clients, family, and friends. And I'm still curious to watch and observe. But something that came up for me yesterday, Monday, when we went just for a walk, like I mentioned earlier, to Covent Garden to see what's happening, grabbed a coffee on the way, had an awesome chat and whatever. And I said to Cliff, you know what? We're moving to our new apartment in 10 days. And on one side, I've been really excited about shops reopening, so I can go and physically pick the things that I want to bring into our new home and whatever. But on the other side, with the overload of information and data and the sensory input from everything, I'm freaking out because it's overwhelming. It was such a little nice, safe cocoon bubble where it was like, oh, you can only order online. So you sit in front of your laptop screen, right? So I'm aware of it, and I'm processing how my body is responding to it. And I give myself a chance to do something with it that I want. Okay, so how do I respond to it? Where do I go? What do I focus on? What do I need to get clear on? Do I want to throw myself in and go into all the different shops, overwhelm myself and whatever? Or do I want to focus on the specifics that are important to me? What is it that I want to do with the capacity that I have? How do I want to fill up that space? But all the people that just went out on the streets on Monday and queued up for hours to certain shops, are they all aware of it? What are they doing with it? What are they filling up? All that space that was created during lockdown, what is coming in? Very often, it's just the same shit that was there before.
Sure,
because people don't have that awareness, right? So my wish for everyone is to stop and pay attention. And it doesn't have to be a long pause. It could be as simple as one breath before you're taking an action, going, okay, why am I really doing this? What's behind that? What's driving it?
Yeah, that's a very astute point. You know, sometimes we just don't breathe. And, you know, I mean, obviously we breathe, but we don't breathe. And, you know, we just take in air. We don't breathe. We don't, you know, I look at breathing, proper breathing, as, and I'm sure that you and Cliff do, as grounding. You know, when you breathe properly and you get that circle of air, because we know everything is a rhythm. We know everything is a circle, a cycle. And when you get that proper breath in, it's that grounding effect and that space you give yourself. And I think people do themselves a real disservice by not giving themselves that space.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And even, you know, Cliff's experiments with one of our clients, with a pro athlete, around his breathing just over the last couple of weeks. And Cliff's been experimenting with himself as well. It's just been fascinating. And again, like everything is from the more spiritual grounding perspective to the physical freaking life force and the oxygen that we need, right? So whether we're going to go and go about our life going, fuck, everything's opening up, I need to just go and absorb all of that and take all of that on and in, and then you realize, well, there's no more space for anything else, and before you know it, you're exhausted, frustrated and tired and sick of everything again. Or do you give yourself that time to actually, it is a split of a second to go reassess, that little moment
to reset, just a reset, right?
Literally. It's Neil Donald Walsh in the book that I've been sending to everybody and creating programs and content on, when everything changes, change everything. I think we talked about it at some point during lockdown. He talks about it. Everyone tells you not to think twice, but he tells you exactly to do that, to think twice, because very often that first thing is a reaction based on our old stories that's not in service of what we want. And when you actually pause, take a breath and think the second time, you give yourself that opportunity to reassess and see whether it is in line with where you're going and what you want, or whether it's not, and which way do you actually choose.
Think twice. I love that. I might call the podcast that, actually.
Yeah.
That's a great concept. I love that. So, oh wow, we've covered so much and started on one tack and gone right through all the subjects again, which is absolutely brilliant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check out that Alan Watts video, try and get that linked on. I think this is just incredible, and just to kind of understand why we settle, to kind of understand how we can reassess, to kind of understand how we can think twice, how we can invite grace in, and how we can just enjoy the process. I think it's just what people need to hear. You can enjoy the process. You can take your time. You don't have to follow the crowd. An old mentor of mine said, I think it was Wayne Dyer actually, he said, when you follow the herd, you step in shit, which coming from Wayne Dyer was hilarious. Just take your time, reassess,
There is no rush.
Ground yourself. There's no rush. Everything is perfect. Everything is fine. Marta, thank you again for another wonderful episode.
Thank you so
much. And roll on July, right?
Absolutely.
Roll on July. Thank you ever so much, and take care. We'll speak again very soon.